There's a strange paradox at the heart of modern crime. Today's killers are smarter, more careful, and have access to more tools than any generation before them. But they're also getting caught at a higher rate than ever. The reason comes down to one simple truth that many criminals refuse to accept. The modern city has no blind spots. Every footstep on pavement, every brake press, every credit card swipe leaves a permanent digital fingerprint somewhere in someone's computer system. And when investigators start piecing those fragments together, no story holds up. Today, we're going to walk through 3 cases where surveillance cameras, GPS data, police body cam footage, and digital metadata completely dismantled every attempt to conceal the truth. 3 cases in 3 different countries. 3 completely different killers, but all sharing one outcome. The machines around them saw everything, remembered everything, and reported everything to a court of law. The first case, and the main focus of this video, unfolded in Frederick, Colorado in August 2018. This is the Watts family massacre, one of the most thoroughly documented cases in the history of modern forensic science. Christopher Watts was 33 years old, an oil field worker at Anadarko Petroleum. From the outside, his life looked like a suburban dream. A nice house, a beautiful pregnant wife named Shanann, 15 weeks along, 2 little girls, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. But behind that picture-perfect family portrait was a completely different reality. Shanann Watts worked for a multi-level marketing company and regularly shared her family's life on social media. Her Facebook posts were full of smiles and family moments, but behind those frames, the marriage was cracking. Shanann sensed her husband pulling away. She told friends that Christopher seemed to have no interest in the 3rd baby. She even bought a marriage counseling book to try to fix things. What Shanann didn't know was that for the 2 months leading up to the tragedy, Christopher had been carrying on an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. To hide the relationship, he installed an app on his phone called Secret Calculator. It looked like an ordinary calculator on the surface, but when you typed in the right passcode, it opened a hidden vault containing hundreds of private messages and photos from overnight trips. He told Kessinger he was in the process of getting a divorce. He described himself as trapped in a loveless marriage. In the early hours of August 13, 2018, Shanann returned home after a work trip to Arizona. A friend dropped her off just before 2 in the morning. This was the last time she was seen alive, captured by the Vivint doorbell camera belonging to the Watts family themselves. The system recorded the image of a pregnant woman carrying a suitcase, stepping through her own front door in the dead of night. What happened inside that house over the next few hours, Christopher Watts would know better than anyone. He strangled his wife to death. Then he smothered his 2 small daughters in their own bedrooms. In the early morning hours, a neighbor named Nathaniel Trinistich had a camera pointed directly at the Watts family driveway. The footage captured the Anadarko work truck reversing close to the garage in darkness, Watts making multiple trips between the house and the vehicle, heavy objects being loaded into the bed of the truck. No one else appearing, no one else leaving. Just one man moving through the darkness before dawn. At the Anadarko oil site in Weld County, Watts buried Shanann's body in a shallow grave on an empty patch of ground. For his daughters Bella and Celeste, he chose something else. He pushed their small bodies into the openings of 2 massive crude oil storage tanks. Those metal tanks had lids with openings roughly 8 inches across, just wide enough for a 3- and 4-year-old. That afternoon, when Shanann couldn't be reached, her friend called the police. Watts opened his front door looking concerned and confused, playing the role of a husband searching for his missing family. And over the next several hours, he executed what he thought was his perfect cover, going on national television, standing outside his house, publicly begging for his family's safe return. But while he was performing for the television cameras, investigators were watching a different kind of camera entirely. When detectives went to Trinistich's house and reviewed the overnight footage, they invited Watts to come watch it with them. The entire interaction was captured on police body cam. What that footage revealed was completely different from the composed husband in front of the news cameras. Watts began pacing restlessly around the living room. He kept running his hands across his face. At one point, he clasped his hands behind his head and stared at the ceiling. The neighbor later told investigators that Watts showed no concern whatsoever for his family's safety. He was entirely focused on trying to explain the truck's movements from that night. Then came the Anadarko truck's GPS telematics system. This wasn't a simple tracking device. It was a comprehensive data collection system logging vehicle speed, acceleration patterns, hard braking events, and exact stop times down to the second. And most critically, it had seatbelt sensors. When FBI agents extracted the data from that morning's drive, they found something that sent a chill through the entire investigation. Not just one, but multiple seatbelts had been fastened in the truck's cab during the trip to the oil site. Bella and Celeste were still alive when they got into that truck. They were only killed after arriving at the disposal site. Perhaps the most haunting piece of evidence in the entire case didn't come from GPS data or the neighbor's camera. It came from a 7-Eleven convenience store near the oil field. The store's security camera captured Watts calmly walking in and buying breakfast shortly after he had buried his wife in the ground and pushed his daughter's bodies into oil tanks. On his face, there was no sign of trauma, no remorse, no distress of any kind, just a routine purchase on an ordinary morning. Under the weight of all this evidence, Watts voluntarily agreed to take a polygraph test. He believed he was skilled enough to fool even the machine. He was wrong. After failing the polygraph, investigators arranged for Watts's own father to enter the interrogation room. And there, in front of his father, with every piece of digital evidence closing in from every direction, Christopher Watts broke down. The interrogation room's security camera captured the moment he put his head in his hands and admitted to killing his wife. On November 6, 2018, Christopher Watts pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole, plus 84 additional years for related charges. The 2,000-page discovery file and hundreds of hours of raw video were made publicly available, turning this case into one of the most analyzed criminal records in history. The marriage counseling book Shanann had bought was found in the recycling bin. No one knows exactly when it was thrown away. If the Watts case demonstrated the power of civilian surveillance infrastructure, our second case shows what happens when an entire murder timeline is captured by the urban camera grid of a major city. December 2018, Auckland, New Zealand. Grace Millane was a 22-year-old British woman backpacking around the world when she matched with a man on Tinder and arranged to meet near the Sky City complex in the city center. The date appeared to proceed through several venues across a few hours before they stepped into an elevator together at the City Life Hotel just before midnight. What the killer didn't realize was that almost every movement he made that evening had been recorded by Auckland's city center CCTV network. Camera footage at Sky City placed them together at 5:45 in the afternoon. Restaurant cameras captured him paying the bill at 8:27 in the evening. Bar cameras recorded him bringing drinks to their table at 9:01 that night, and the hotel elevator camera captured the last image of Grace Millane alive. The next day was Grace's 22nd birthday, but instead of calling her family as planned, she was inside a suitcase the killer had purchased that very morning. City store cameras captured him calmly buying specialized cleaning products and a large suitcase in the hours after the murder. The City Life Hotel lobby camera recorded him wheeling that suitcase through the building's entrance and loading it into a rental car. He then drove to a forested area outside Auckland to bury her. At trial, the killer attempted to argue that Grace died accidentally during a consensual activity, but the chain of behavior captured on camera the following day destroyed that argument completely. Nobody calmly shops for cleaning supplies and a body-sized suitcase in the aftermath of an accidental death. That was calculated, prepared, and purposeful behavior. The jury convicted him of murder in November 2019. The third case is perhaps the most disturbing of the three because the killer wasn't operating in secret. He was operating in uniform. On the night of March 3, 2021, Sarah Everard, a 33-year-old woman, was walking home from a friend's house near Clapham Common in South London. A car pulled up beside her. The driver presented a police badge and told her she was being detained for violating COVID regulations. She didn't resist. She complied, because everything he was doing looked exactly like a legitimate arrest. Wayne Couzens was an active-duty Metropolitan Police officer. The arrest was completely fabricated. There was no violation, no legal grounds for detention. But he was in uniform, he had the authority, and he used both to abduct a woman who had every reason to trust him. Couzens was knowledgeable about forensic investigation techniques. He understood cameras. He knew how to minimize visible traces. But he failed to account for one thing: the dashcams mounted on private vehicles and on London's public buses. At 9:27 that evening, a fixed camera on Cavendish Road confirmed Sarah was walking toward home. 5 minutes later, the same camera recorded Couzens's rental car moving eastward. At 9:34 on Poinders Road, dashcam footage from passing vehicles captured a blurred but identifiable image: a man in police dress putting a woman in handcuffs on the side of the road. Couzens' journey was tracked by traffic cameras and the UK's automatic number plate recognition network across multiple counties. At 11:38 that night near Dover, traffic cameras recorded him transferring Sarah from the rental car to his personal vehicle. At 3:21 in the morning, a security camera near Hodes Wood in Kent recorded his car moving through the darkness. It was precisely these time-stamped images that directed search teams to the Ashford woodland, where Sarah Everard's remains were found on March 10, 2021. Faced with a visual timeline that left no room for alternative explanations, Wayne Couzens pleaded guilty to kidnap, rape, and murder in July 2021. He was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning he will never be released. Looking back across all three cases, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Each killer believed they had controlled the physical environment around their crime. Watts chose a vast, deserted oil field. Grace's killer chose a locked apartment many floors above the street. Couzens chose a dark forest in rural England. But all three made the same fatal miscalculation. They ignored the machines around them. The modern city doesn't care about your plans. It has no emotions, no judgment, no mercy. It just watches and remembers. Every brake event, every seatbelt click, every late-night purchase of cleaning supplies and a suitcase, every car moving through the dark at 3 in the morning becomes evidence that no one can erase. The concept of the perfect crime no longer exists in the world we live in. Not because people became smarter at catching killers, but because the machines around us never sleep. They just keep recording, keep timestamping,